Welcome to Crafting Men. I'm your host, Jared Hatch, and this is another episode on understanding stress. Something that we talk about, we seem to understand, but struggle with defining and measuring within our lives. That's what I want to explore today with you. I also want to look at how we can use Stoicism to address and be more comfortable as we prepare for stressful events. But first, be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the Crafting Men episodes. If you read about mental health, you will see that stress and anxiety is on the rise. Shouldn't be surprising for any normal, ordinary thinking person, but it confuses a lot of professionals. They can't really put their thumb on what's driving it. Of course, it couldn't be a recent global pandemic that was politically ostracizing and difficult for everyone involved. It couldn't be layoffs and inflation. It couldn't be because we don't even know what a woman is anymore. And it certainly can't be the fact that we have programmed an entire generation of women in the developed world to think that they don't need men at all in their lives. And then when men and women realize they need each other, they don't know how to get along. No, I mean, why would stress and anxiety be up? I can't think of anything. But hey, at least the professionals, they don't know why it's on the rise, but they've got some great answers for you. I mean, check this out. Apparently they have a big thing for yoga. Granted, yoga might work, but I just don't see it working in a group of dudes. Hey guys, did you do your downward dog today? It just doesn't land to me. Oh, and my favorite, of course, is, just don't think about the fact that you have stress or anxiety in your life. Just play that ostrich. Works every time. Joking aside, I'm confident that there are some professionals that do help out with anxiety and stress, because the good news about these mental and emotional issues is that they're more based around coping mechanisms and lifestyle management. They're, generally speaking, not a genetic or a chemical imbalance. Yes, there are drugs that can be used, and you will find those people that like to blame your genetics on your stress and anxiety. Not going to get into that. I just want to acknowledge that there probably are some good practitioners in the field of mental health that can help in stress and anxiety, because in the spectrum of mental illnesses, it's on the more treatable side, given the different approaches of, like I said, coping with stress and changing your lifestyle to have a more productive and healthy view of yourself and your outlook of life. These are all controllable behavioral adjustments that can be made for people that were not raised in a household or in a place where they understood how to develop themselves as an adult in a healthy manner. As we continue seeing a decline of familial roles and the role of mentorship in our lives, these types of issues are on the rise. Something you will not see discussed is the measurement of stress. This is what I want to talk a little bit about. Everyone talks about how you need to avoid stress or reduce stress, but it's very hard to reduce or avoid something that you're not able to identify the source of. For instance, employment can be stressful, but does that mean it's bad? Think about when you first start work. It's anxious because you don't know what to do, you don't know what to expect. But as you get used to it, as you become proficient at it, it becomes rewarding and it becomes fulfilling, because you know how to perform well, you know how to earn a place, you know how to provide for yourself and for those that you care for, you know how to add value to your customers and to your colleagues. This creates a wonderful sense of community and belonging, but there's still stress associated to that. There's never going to go away. So if you're saying avoid stress, does that mean you're going to stop working? But that's not going to reduce your stress, because you still have to pay the bills. You still want to eat. I'm assuming you want to buy something at some point in your life, so you need money coming in. This is where I think we do ourselves a disservice by not really looking at how to measure and articulate where stress comes from. Without any more embellishment, let's get into it then. In my view, stress can be measured with the gap between your expectation and reality. Think of this as an example for a second. At work, you've been performing well consistently for the past year. Your direct manager and the other leaders around have been consistently talking to how they are looking forward to the performance cycle to acknowledge and reward you for the contribution you've done for the company, for the customers, etc. Performance reviews begin. You go in with your immediate manager and there's a discussion of, well, economic times the way they are, we want to take care of you. If it gets down to it, what's your preference? Bonus or raise? Things of that nature. You leave the meeting feeling confident, knowing that, hey, things are tough right now, but you're being taken care of. A few weeks later, performance cycle decisions are done, and it's time to be informed. You go into the office, and there's your immediate manager and an HR lead. So your initial thought is, well, maybe I got the promotion because I got an HR person in here, right? Makes sense. Instead, your boss says, well, I'm going to have to hand this meeting over to the HR lead for a second. So you look to the HR lead, and they tell you, due to the economic climate that we're in, we're no longer able to afford you, so you're being laid off. Walk through what you're feeling now in that moment. That recoiling of emotions and the turmoil that you're having going on within you is the physiological and emotional reactions from expectations and reality clashing. The greater the distance between your expectations and the reality, the more difficult the turmoil. It works the same for someone who has an unexpected but happy set of good news.
Shut up!
Like I said in my previous video, your body doesn't know the difference in the stressors that are occurring to it, it reacts the same. So whether or not you have good or bad news that you did not expect, your body is going to have to go through the physiological reactions. All of this turmoil that's going on within you is the source of stress, because you now have to level set yourself to the new reality that you were not expecting. But what about long-term stressors, you might say? Let's say you're in a dead-end job, a loveless marriage, your kids don't respect you, and so on. It still applies. Walk through this scenario for a second here. You wake up in the morning, you know that you're not going to enjoy your job. You've got yet another set of hours ahead of you that are unfulfilling, unrewarding, thankless interaction that you feel are below your skill, below your talent, and that you're not compensated properly for. Is your first thought, I wish it was this, or is your first thought the acceptance of reality? If your first thought is the longing for that wish, you are investing your emotions and your time and your energy into an expectation that you know isn't real. So you are deliberately creating space between expectation and reality. As you deliberately do this every morning, you are repunishing yourself when you clock into work, because now you know that it's not there, but in your mind, you're going to play out this fantasy that it's going to work better today. It's going to be different today. And so you play that out because it makes you feel good in the morning, gets you through your breakfast routine or your commute into the office. But as soon as you clock in, that expectation, or that false expectation in this situation, is going to be dashed brutally by reality, as it is every day. This accrual of that stress will continue as long as you deliberately look at creating a fantasy version of reality instead of accepting the real one that is in front of you. This long-term habit of building a fantasy on false set of expectations leads to some self-destructive behaviors with alcohol, pornography, or other things that in turn bring their own emotional baggage and their own difficulties to get through. And really, we all have to step back and think about this. 65% of people are average in the workplace. It's a hard thing to accept because we all want to be top dog. We're all programmed to think that if you're adequate or if you're average, you're a failure. But again, in a bell curve, about 65% are average. I want you to consider the last job offering you applied for. Did they ask for an average and adequate person that can barely hit the proficiency remarks, or do they look for the go-getter, the above average person, the heavy hitter, jack of all trades, the magician, the so on and the so forth? See, businesses understand. They sell you what you want to hear. You want to hear that you're special, that you're above the rest.
I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
And so they tell you that. No one likes to admit that. I'm sure I've irritated a few people with that statement. But an unemotional, unaffiliated investment into the fantasy concept that somehow or another you are the unique person blessed to grant this company, this country, the so on, your gifts, is inherently narcissistic. And it's unrealistic, it's unhealthy. You're setting yourself up for more stressors. That's all there is to it. All right, enough explanation of it. How does Stoicism apply to this? First and foremost, I want you to take everything you've heard about Stoics and not being emotional and just throw it out the window. Stoics believe in not losing control to your emotions. It's not that you don't feel emotions, it's that you don't lose control of it. There is a difference here. There are two principles of Stoicism I think help this scenario. First of all, it's the principle of acceptance. There's a beautiful quote here from Epictetus. The chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself what are externals, not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control. He's talking about understanding what you have influence over versus what you don't, and then accepting for the things you do not have control over. Understanding who Epictetus was, I think, helps add value to this. He was born in ancient Greece as a slave. Whether or not he was tortured or he was born lame, one of his legs didn't work. Eventually in his adulthood, when he was able to attain freedom, he was then exiled from Rome because he was teaching philosophy that the emperor didn't agree with. So this is a man that was born a slave, lived his life handicapped, and finally in exile. That is talking about things you can control versus things that you cannot, and finding happiness in focusing on the things that you can control. An example of this being lived out was with Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a Jew in Germany during the Holocaust. He was sent to one of the camps. Following that, he immigrated to America and became a psychiatrist. One of the quotes that he had to say on this matter was this: "Forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess except one thing: your freedom to choose how you will respond to the situation." These are men that came from extremely trying scenarios, but their teaching us to focus on how you react, your behavior, your emotions, not on the forces outside of that. And in finding that focus, you have control and you have confidence in your life and your abilities. Now, the second principle I want to share with you is that of negative visualization. There's an old saying in the Marine Corps that you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to your level of training. This is true no matter what you do. This is important when you start thinking about the negative visualizations. When bad things happen, and I say when because we all know that life is trial, life is suffering, it's hard, it's messy. And so it's not a matter of if something will happen, it's when something will happen. So when something bad happens, have you trained yourself emotionally and mentally to handle it? Yes, Mother Nature has a wonderful way of driving results regardless of the impact on the individual that is being ground through. That is the existence of this broken world that we all must suffer through. The question is whether or not you will be mentally and emotionally prepared, because when something bad happens, what is your level of training that you're going to sink to? A Stoic quote here from Seneca is as follows: "What is quite unlooked for is most crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. This is a reason for ensuring that nothing ever takes us by surprise. We should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events. Rehearse them in your mind. Exile, torture, war, shipwreck, all the terms of our human lot should be before our eyes." Ever hear people use the word meditate? They use a lot of strange things like look for the end of thought or find the void, things of that nature. I'm not trying to belittle those, but they never made sense to me. This form of meditation does, however. Sitting there and walking yourself emotionally through something that could happen, something that within your life is a possibility. When you walk through that and allow your emotions to go through it, you can sculpt and train how you want to react to it in a time where it's not urgent. My son and I were in a car wreck a few years ago. We were going about 80 miles an hour down the freeway in my truck, and another truck came perpendicular into my lane, cut into my headlights. I tried to swerve, was about to roll the truck when we hit. We spun around a few times, I don't know how many. We ended with, I don't know where his vehicle was at the time, but my truck ended facing back the way we had come, half on the road, half off on a shoulder. There was a semi bearing down at us at the time. I had enough time to look over to my son and put my hand on his chest and tell him to breathe before the semi hit us, knocked us up into a construction barrier, and then drug us for about 100 yards. It was a very frightening accident. My son was understandably very shooken up, but when the cops showed up, which was actually a pretty impressive response time, one of the cops had a hard time accepting that I was the third driver. There was another driver that had stopped. He had observed the whole wreck, and he had been one of the ones calling 911 and was falling apart. He was ecstatic. And when the cops were talking with him, it was very clear this one officer thought that he was the third driver. Now, I was coming back from having checked on the other drivers, having already checked on my son, went to go check on the other drivers. I had my wits about me. Yes, my heart was pounding, my blood pressure was up. All the normal physiological reactions to stress were in full force. But because I'd gone through a negative visualization concept where I prepared myself for something bad happening to me or to my son, I didn't have to worry about the emotional response. I was feeling them, but in the bounds that I had trained them to be in. This was a good thing for me as a father, for my son to be that source of strength for him in that moment. So you see the point here. You train your emotions in advance of the negative things that could happen in your life. Then when they inevitably do happen, you have a level of training for you to fall back on. You have a sense of confidence in how you, based on your principles and who you want to be, can react. Is it perfect? Of course not. But not preparing is far worse. Now this works for systemic and long-term stressors as well. Again, if you're that person that feels like you're in a dead-end job, you feel stuck, or you're in a loveless marriage, feel like your children don't respect you and you don't know your children and you don't know how to bridge the gap. These are not going to be fixed overnight. But if you stop investing into that fantasy view of expectations and instead you separate what is doable versus what is not doable and then focus with religious rigor on the next step in front of you to moving into a more healthy position, it will happen because now you're investing all of your time, your energy, and your emotions into your success as opposed to investing your time and your emotions into a fantasy that's just going to be destroyed the next time the cycle comes around again. This is why Stoicism is so important and so healthy for us as men, especially, to be that solid foundation that our wives and our children want to be able to lean on when they are struggling. It also allows us to be more independent because if you go through a negative visualization process, you can train yourself in how to act. When is it appropriate to open up? When is it not? All of these things are now at your control. It's a wonderful thing to be in control of your emotions and your life. Hope you enjoyed the time with me today. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and don't forget that notification bell. Stay tuned. We're going to have some more episodes coming up on more stress next week. Till then, you'll have a great day.